Hello and welcome to another episode of Let's Argue About Plants, the podcast for people who love plants.
Just not always the same ones.
I'm Steve Aiken from Fine Gardening Magazine. That's where I talk, Danielle.
Oh, sorry. I'm stepping on you already. I'm Danielle Sherry from Fine Gardening Magazine. And today's topic could not be any more relevant in our current time. It is plants that made it through. And I'm going to say add on through summer's worst, because it has literally been the worst summer for my garden since I planted it 10 years ago.
I was using Summer Survivors as the title.
I like that. All right. Maybe we'll change that. Summer Survivors.
But since we're changing, can we change the whole topic? Because is it too late to change the topic? Because I don't want to do this one. Yeah,
no, it is too late. This is your MO. You agree to these topics and then you complain about them leading up to it. And then we go into record and you're like, oh, that's not what I chose plants for. I chose it for a different topic.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, my problem is that there is a Let's Argue About Plants jinx in which whenever I talk about a plant that has survived something, it then dies. So a few months ago, we did, plants that made it through the winter.
Yeah.
And then like the day after we did that broadcast, we had a cold snap and I lost a lot of those plants that I mentioned. My beesia has not recovered.
Done.
Yeah. And so whenever we're talking about, like really tough plants that can survive this or that, I'm worried that I'm going to recommend all these plants and then in another week they're going to die, or by next spring they're going to be done, because they look good now, but they're really suffering underground or something like that. So can we?
So you just want to like we could make a little like, I don't know, a caveat that these are surviving right now, but they may not survive in another day.
I don't know. I just want let's just change the topic altogether.
Oh, okay.
Or is it too late for that? Because we're already recording. It's probably too late.
It's too late. But you can knock on wood every time, get a little knock going on every time you talk about a plant. So yeah, summer's worse. So we live in vastly different areas of Connecticut, and I don't know about you.
I mean, come on. There isn't that much of a diversity in Connecticut in any regard. But
well, listen, as far as weather is concerned at this point, it has been, because every time that we've, talked on the sly here, you're like, oh yeah, we got a little bit of rain. So I looked up what my location, we actually have a weather station right up the street here, got for rain. And we have had less than a quarter inch since the first week in June. It has been epically dry. Plants that I've had in the ground since I moved in are looking decimated, absolutely decimated. And we have well water, so I can't exactly go out there and start, watering willy-nilly. So this has truly been a test to see really what plants are drought tolerant, because this is epic.
Yeah, I mean, it's so bad that a tropical storm raced through here, causing massive destruction, yet gave us no rain, like zero rain.
Yeah.
Trees were down, power outages for weeks, and no rain. No rain.
Yep, I know. It was injury to insult. I was actually willing to take trees down, my vegetable garden completely destroyed. If we got even just a quarter inch, even just an eighth of an inch, I would have been excited. But yeah, no, not a thing.
Yeah, the hydrangeas were still wilting the day after the storm, and it's like, come on.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy.
So it's been really dry.
Mm-hmm.
It's our hottest summer on record, said the weatherman this morning. Normally we have 15 days above 90 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
We're at 31.
It's insane.
And with that has been tropical level humidity.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been hot. Mm-hmm. It's been dry in terms of no rain, but the humidity has been so gross that you can't get outside and do anything.
Yeah.
And it has not stopped. So the high humidity means perfect for diseases.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say the only thing that's doing well in my garden right now is the fungal diseases.
Yeah, the powdery mildew is like, this has been a great summer.
Woohoo! So it really has been interesting, though, to see what has made it through. And some for me, there's maybe one plant that's on my list that is an obvious candidate that made it through, and then there were some that I was pretty shocked about. What about you?
Well, I have a lot of plants that have seemed to be making it through and struggling,
Yeah.
but I focus on ones that I'm surprised by.
Yeah, that's what
Like,
I
oh,
did too.
that one's
Hmm.
making it through. Okay, cool. So,
Yeah.
do you want to go first? Or you want me to go first?
You know what? Go ahead. Go ahead. You go first.
You would think by now I would have it down as to who goes first.
I think we mix it up. I think we mix it
Oh,
up.
all
So.
right. So that's why I don't know. The first plant that came to mind when we were doing this was a plant that you gave me. Well, you didn't really give it to me last year. You had some bare root shrubs that you brought
Yes.
in for the gang at Fine Gardening, and everybody grabbed what they wanted. And then as I was leaving for the day, the ones that were left were there, so I took them all. And they were bare root. You had chucked some kind of soil on top of the roots, and they're in like this long window box type plastic planter. And so I brought that home, and there they sat for the entire summer. Like late spring, all summer into fall in this dirt, and I would occasionally water them. I didn't know what was what. There was a little piece of landscape, tape tied to it with a name written on it. And so fall rolled around, and like it was getting to be like around frost. And I'm like, I should probably get these things in the grounds if they have any chance whatsoever of living. And one of the ones that very few lived, sorry to say, but one of the ones that lived was lotus moon pearl bush, which is exocorta.
Mm.
Not a shrub that I've grown before, seen but not grown.
Hmm.
And so I was surprised it came back in the spring. And it has looked great all year. And knocking on wood here, don't jinx me, garden. All through the summer, it has looked fine. Like we have been in this drought, high humidity. Yeah. It's looking great. It looks like the weather's fine.
Mm-hmm.
I have watered it exactly 0 times. I have given it exactly 0 attention other than to walk by. I'm like, ooh, that one's still alive. And then to look at the name, like, oh, I have to remember that. Exocorta. Lotus Moon. Got to remember that one.
Cool name.
Yeah, so it's doing great. To me, this is a good sign that this is a hard shrub. Of course, I'll transplant it into its permanent spot and it'll die. But as of now, like a really super cool, tough shrub. It's rated at zones 3 to 7.
Mm-hmm.
So it shouldn't really like too much heat.
No, one wouldn't think so.
Yeah, but it's doing fine. But then there's New England heat and zone 8 heat. Those are 2 different things.
Yeah.
It's supposed to get 4 to 5 feet high, 3 to 4 feet wide. It's a full sun plant, and then its time to shine is spring when it just gets it gets covered with these white flowers. First, it's a pearl bush is the common name. And so when they're buds, it looks like there's little pearls up and down the stems. And then when they open, the entire shrub turns into like this white puffball. And it's really impressive. Mine didn't flower. So
first year, and
right,
you put it through hell beforehand. So
yeah. So I'm talking about what should happen, not what has happened to me. But it's just amazing. It's just this like I said, a white puffball. And white is just the perfect color for the soft light of spring. It's not garish. It just kind of shines and looks awesome. I can't wait for it. Deer resistant. You can apparently good for cut flowers.
Okay. So I'm trying to envision what the flower looks like because I am not familiar with this shrub at all, except for when it arrived on my doorstep as a bare root shrub and I brought it into the office. Is it like deutzia? Kind of gets those like white puffballs or like a flowering almond or something like that.
No, it looks like a flower, but like you kind of don't take the flowers individually. You take them all together. You stand back and look at the shrub, but it's it has broad petals to it.
Oh, okay, okay.
For some reason, all that's coming to mind is St. John's wort. Like it would be the white version of
Oh,
St. John's wort.
okay.
I could be off here, but it's just like the whole thing gets covered in flower. So like you experience that whole thing. It's like a hydrangea flower.
Okay.
You take in that entire floret,
Mm-hmm.
but all the little guys are the individual flowers.
Gotcha,
And like
gotcha.
you experience the whole thing all at once. So I wish I had a better answer for you.
No, no,
On that.
that
Like
did tell me because I was thinking, like maybe it was because it was the reference to when it blooms. I was thinking, those other shrubs from spring, like a deutzia or a flowering almond, that are just, they almost do look like little cotton balls. They're these little starbursts, and the whole thing bursts into bloom. But it sounds like these are a little bit more substantial of a flower if you were to get up on top of them.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, like they can
Yeah.
hold their own. As just one flower. But many years ago, I was in a garden that was loaded with white azaleas.
Mm.
It was really impressive, and it made me want to rethink my prejudice against azaleas. They are common, therefore they can't be cool, which is kind of their only knock against them. And I kept thinking I should add some of those to my garden, but then not tell anybody that they're azaleas. I'll give them some other name. Azaleas, something like that. But this would do the job for it, like this nice white, burst in spring. Really, really excited for it. Please
That's
don't die.
awesome.
Please don't die.
Please don't die. Now I'm all upset that I gave that shrub up. I mean, there's only so much room that I have. But so that brings up something interesting, though. I just want to put this out there. So I had some bare root shrubs that I planted last year and abused and didn't water. And those are making it through this current situation quite well. Do we think it's a bare root thing? Do we think that, that's almost the equivalent of like root washing, which has been, a common topic? Yeah.
It's, I think it is the preferred state to plant a woody plant.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have any roots in that potting soil that you need to get rid of and then put it under stress. Like when you go bare root and it's dormant. So basically when it wakes up and starts putting out roots, it's putting out roots into the native soil. So yeah. And so whatever that potting media that it's in, whatever is left in there, whatever that dries out really fast.
Yeah. So it's conditioned itself well to, be a hardy, make it through situation.
That's my guess.
Yeah.
I don't have any hard science on that, but yeah.
No, yeah, it was just something that occurred to me when you were talking about it because we got a hardy shipment of bare root shrubs of all sizes, and I was noticing that a few of the ones I had a few hydrangea paniculata and a few new sterile spirea that were in the same form. They were bare root. I didn't plant them immediately. I chucked them in inhospitable places, just saying, please live. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, they're doing really well in the current drought. So, interesting. Very interesting. So this is going to be Freaky Friday, even though it's a Wednesday, because you're starting out with a shrub, which normally I talk about shrubs, and I'm going to start out with a perennial. Because something that I'm pretty impressed with that's making it through and has historically, during my gardening career, made it through is Visions astilbe, which is Astilbe chinensis visions. And astilbes, they're known for not making it through drought. A normal summer, they're known to just shrivel up and look like holy heck and just say, oh, I haven't had rain every 3 days and at least, an inch of rain to reach my roots. That's it. I give up. I'm getting crunchy. And then usually what I've gone through and done in past years is just cut those things right down to the ground. But Visions astilbe, classically for me, has made it through, and not just made it through, looked great. The foliage not the least bit crunchy. It's, a little bit broader, a little bit thicker of that highly dissected leaf that you're used to with an astilbe. And, the flower on this is a puffy cotton candy like flower. It's a little bit thicker, a little bit denser. The stems on Visions is a little bit thicker as well. And, in researching this, they do say that the chinensis species is actually a little bit more drought tolerant than any other type of astilbe that you can get. So this is zones 4 to 8. It gets 1 to 1.5 feet tall and wide. The one that I have currently in my garden was a transplant from a previous garden. And I just peeked outside to look at it this morning, and oh yeah, it's doing its thing. It's in partial shade for me. So, astilbes will take partial shade to full shade. And it's really looking good. And I thought if there was ever a year that this thing was going to let me down, it's this year. And it hasn't. It looks pretty awesome still. One of the very few perennials that is looking awesome still for me. And, I've got it in lean, well-drained soil because that's just what I have. I haven't watered it whatsoever. I haven't given it any supplemental, drinks here or there. It's really, really cool. Now, and interestingly enough, right down the bed a little bit further, I think you have this plant too. I have Amber Moon astilbe, which is another variety, and it was newer a few years ago. It's kind of got this yellowy chartreuse foliage to it. That thing is crisp up. It might as well be dead. It looks completely brown, totally crispy. It's about to get the chop because there's nothing left of it. So there's the comparison between Visions and Amber Moon, and Visions is the clear champ.
So farther down the bed, is it in more sun? Because astilbe is a shade plant, which we didn't mention.
Yeah. So no. Partial to full shade is where I've got both of them. And yeah, literally, I mean, we're talking 3 feet maybe that they're apart. And yeah, Amber Moon, toast.
So how much sun does it get?
It gets late afternoon sun from maybe 3 o'clock on. Just not a lot. And then by I would say by 6, by the time we're using our grill, which it's next to kind of where we grill, it's gone and the sun is completely gone. So it doesn't get that much sun. Depending on the year, because there's trees around, so it'll get, earlier in the spring, it gets a little bit more sun. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you were right. When you said if there's one plant that you would expect to not make it through a drought, it would be astilbe. Mm-hmm. I don't even try with astilbe, like in any year, just because I have a drier spot, which is weird because my neighbors, who are also my parents, my mother grows astilbes, and she has like a nice little stand of them because she's closer to the woods, a little shadier, a little damper over there, and she does. Of course, hers are toast this year.
Yeah.
So it's good to know about Visions. Visions is also kind of it's kind of a breeding. It's like there's visions in pink, visions in white.
Yep.
So there's different versions of it. So it's it's kind of like the gold standard without being gold. What color are the flowers?
They're a kind of a bright pink magenta color. Very, very shocking. Kind of that, if red and pink and purple all combined, it kind of looks like that. But yeah, and the interesting thing is a lot of those offspring and a lot of, the babies and the breeding that's gone around Visions, they're always touted as disease resistant. And I think a lot of that is because, once the other astilbes start to succumb to drought, not Visions, they become susceptible to the rust and the fungal diseases. And that's all happened to me before as well. So, I think that's my theory, is that they tout, Visions and its offspring as more disease resistant because they don't succumb to the drought and, therefore then get diseased.
And how many years have you had it in that spot?
Well, since I moved, so 9 years.
All right. So it's well established.
It's well established. It is. Yeah, definitely.
Too, yeah. So if I went out and planted Visions, like right now during this drought, doesn't mean it's going to end.
Yeah, no, I don't think that any of the plants that we're saying today would be something that you would want to go out and plant immediately right now. I don't think anybody should be planting anything right now, honestly.
Well, that clears up my weekend. So speaking of planting and proper timing, I planted a bunch of plants this spring,
Yes.
as I tend to do. And I have not been great about watering them. I've watered a few, from time to time, like, they start to crisp up. I really should go down there. And it dawned on me maybe like a week or two ago that I completely forgot about this other plant that I planted this spring, and I haven't been to look at it. I haven't watered it. I don't know if it's a goner. It's got to be a goner because I planted it in spring, forgot about it. Drought, terrible heat, whatever. It's got to be a goner. And so, in touring around looking for plants that did well this summer, I'm like, oh, I should go check it out because it's right by the mailbox. And I looked at it, and it is still there. Doing just fine is pasque flower, Pulsatilla vulgaris, a wonderful spring bloomer, zones 4 to 8, still doing great. Looks just fine. Does not seem to resent the fact that I have forgotten all about it. And I was so excited when I planted it. Finally,
that is shocking.
I got pasque flower back. Right, but it's a rock garden plant. It's used to hot and dry summers, but still, like, you need to get established to be able to do that. And again, please don't die on me. Please don't die on me. I'm saying good things about you. So if you're not familiar with this plant, it's up to 1 foot tall and wide. It's just a little guy, full sun to partial shade. And in spring, it has these flowers that are they're like bell shaped, but they're sideways.
Okay.
I wrote down I wrote down sideways bowls. So if we're bell shaped, you would think it was hanging down, and if it was bowl shaped, you would think it was like kind of had like the round part at the bottom, but they go sideways.
Okay.
And when you see the picture of this plant, you'll understand. And all of a sudden it will make sense. Right now,
okay.
I sound like an idiot.
I mean, I know what it looks like, and I'm a little lost. But
how do you describe that shape? It's like it's purple with yellow stamens on the inside, and it's bell shaped. But instead of hanging down, it like goes out to the side. I mean, how would you describe that?
I mean, that's a tough one. I almost feel like it's, oh gosh, is it sort of trillium flower looking? Is it sort of anemone on steroids looking flower? I don't know. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to describe. It's like
we have our first mention of steroids this episode.
Yes. Everybody drink. Take a shot. Shot. But yeah, it is it's a star-shaped flower, but it's connected more in each of its petals. So yeah, okay, sideways bowl. I'll follow you.
Okay. But anyway, it flowers in early spring, so it's a great one. It's after the reticulated iris, but around the time of late daffodils, about. And after the flowers are done, you get like these fluffy seed heads, like this big ball of fluff, sort of like certain clematis. Gets the really fluffy seed heads, the ones that they call old man's beard. It's really fluffy, puff of smoke kind of thing that hangs on for weeks. The foliage is attractive too. It's deeply divided. Like if fern fronds were round, like that's what it would be. So it's just this wonderful spring plant, and it's hanging on there. Good drainage is essential, apparently, and I have it in my rock garden section. Supposedly, moving them is discouraged. I've never tried to move one. Yeah, I've never tried to move one. I had them in my old house, loved them, and then have been trying to. Every year I say, I need pasque flower. But for me, it's hard to buy early spring flowers because it's hard to see them in the nursery to get them. And so I finally did a mail order thing. But they're still doing great. And the only thing was I went down there yesterday to compliment them on how well they were doing. And the voles have returned. So they were not discouraged. I try to bury the plants down there in gravel and then do like a gravel top dressing so that the voles will not be encouraged to kind of like chomp through the. And so what they've done is they've dug underneath my gravel and gone up. So there's just a big hole, with some pasque flower foliage. They didn't get to, I think I planted 6 of them, and they got to 1.
All right.
but it's still so disheartening, like,
Yeah.
that they're back. But I was really surprised because, like I said, I've forgotten about it. I didn't water it at all. I watered blue fescue, which is drought tolerant. I watered catmint, some new dwarf catmint. I watered that because that's drought tolerant. I forgot all about pasque-flower, and it seems to be forgiving me.
And that's interesting because of those three, I would think that that would be the most delicate
Right?
and the least likely to be okay with not being watered. Now, did you mention zones on this guy?
If I did, I would have said zone 4 to 8, and if I did, then I would say that it's hardy zones 4 to 8.
And so I always assumed incorrectly, obviously, because we are now at the end of summer, that this was an ephemeral. I thought eventually the foliage of this just went by the wayside, and maybe that's because it's around the same time as many other ephemerals bloom, that I just lumped it into that category.
I didn't, in my research, I didn't find anything that said that. And in my experience, as I have just admitted, is that kind of after spring, I tend to forget about it and don't go back and check on it. So I don't think so. Like, mine's still hanging around. So,
cool. And it's got neat foliage, which is great. Like, it's got this very ferny, kind of cool looking foliage. So, all right, I might have to consider that, because I honestly, like the limited space that I have in my garden, it's really hard for me to make a commitment to a spring ephemeral unless it's really amazing. And so this not being ephemeral, I've got some places for it.
But it's one of those things that when I see it in spring, it makes me happy. Like, look, pasque-flower. Oh, great. Isn't that wonderful? It's not native.
No.
I think Exocorda was native. Well, I shouldn't say if I don't know. But pasque-flowers is native to Europe. It's not native to North America. But it brings me joy in the summer. I'm glad to have it back in my garden, and I'm glad that it's doing well despite my utter and complete neglect.
Well, so that is an interesting segue, because I too planted several things this spring, and some of the things that I planted, I put up on my hospital hill, and frequent listeners to this podcast will know all about my hospital hill. It's behind my house, and it's kind of where I chuck everything that I don't really know what to do with, or plants that I kind of was given or were sample plants and I just don't really have an affection for them. I just throw them up on this very lean, very well drained, very, very terrible full sun area. And I've been trying to experiment a little bit more with phlox paniculata, because it's a plant for a long time that I just said, I do not like phlox. I recently did an Instagram post that said, I do not like phlox. I do not like pink. And yet I love this.
Ooh, I thought you were going Dr. Seuss there. You didn't, so.
No, I do not like phlox. I do not like pink. I do not like green eggs and ham. No, I do love this phlox that I had gotten years ago that I've talked about on this podcast, which was coral cream drop. It's doing great. And I think the reason that I'm giving it a pass is because it doesn't get the powdery mildew. It doesn't get the rust. It doesn't have a lot of the diseases that, garden phlox is known to get. So I decided to take a chance this year and said, well, maybe for Hospital Hill, I need to get some phlox. So I got this new variety called opalescence. And it is part of one of the newer phloxes. Why are you laughing? All right. So opalescence, it's part of some new phloxes that they've bred to apparently be, steel constitutions, no disease whatsoever. And I just thought, I'll throw them up on that hill. It's full sun. It's terrible soil. Let's see what this puppy can do. I planted 3 of them on Hospital Hill, and I don't think I watered them once. Now, I planted them in early spring. We did have a very, very wet May. So they got established, and then I totally forgot about them. And all of a sudden, I guess it was about a month ago, I noticed these really beautiful blooms, and there's a bunch of weeds up there. So I couldn't really tell, oh, is that a beautiful weed blooming? No, it's the opalescence phlox. And it was this really interesting color. It's like an opal. It's a little pink, it's a little blue, it's a little white, it's a little purple. I mean, it really has this weird bicolor quality to it where depending on what time of day it is, it looks a different color. Because early morning, it looks white. Middle of the day, it looks pink. End of the day, kind of looks purpley blue. It's interesting. But zones 3 to 8, so, tough as far as that span, same as, most phlox paniculata. And I looked at it about 3 days ago. It's wilting, but it's hanging on and it's still blooming. I haven't deadheaded this thing. It's still going strong. And, I cannot believe this thing is still alive. It had some wilted foliage, but that was about it. So, I took a cup of water that I was drinking and I just kind of dumped it on a few of them, a little sprinkle. And yeah, it looks great. So I'm shocked, totally shocked. And if this thing makes it, man, yeah, that's a winner. I'm getting a dozen more. I'm going to put the rest of them up on Hospital Hill and go for it, because talk about a long bloom time. And it's about 30 inches tall eventually and about, 2 feet wide. So, 2x2, 3x2, around that range.
So the humidity plus phlox paniculata equals powdery mildew. And you've had none on this one.
None. And actually the coral cream drop, which I, adore and came around to a few years ago, I have noticed like down at the bottom, a few little leaves and some spots of powdery mildew on that one. But this new opalescence, not a spot on it. I can't explain it. It's out of this world. I'm so excited.
So phlox paniculata is native to North America and is favored by pollinators, we should say.
Yes.
My thing about phlox is that they are breeding for this strength now and like resistance to powdery mildew and all that stuff. And there are some really good cultivars out there, but sometimes they are the most, trying not to swear here, the most blankety blank garish colors that you could ever find. And sometimes it's a combination of garish colors in one flower, and they can be pretty darn hideous. No fault to the plant; it's the breeder that did it. But there are some wonderful cultivars out there too. Usually pink, which is not my thing. I have some white phlox. They're doing great. That's another one that I would have been surprised that is doing well.
Yeah, shocking. And this opalescence, I mean, sometimes we make fun of breeders all the time and say, oh my gosh, that is the stupidest name. That is the silliest name to give a plant. Opalescence, perfect. Absolutely perfect. I really think that it properly describes what this flower actually looks like.
I thought I snickered because it sounded to me like an Evanescence cover band. Appearing at your local bar.
No, you didn't think of opal gemstones. That's what I thought of.
I don't know. I don't even know what an opal looks like. But well, I don't know. I'm not into gemstones. I don't get that stuff. But talking about all the different colors that this thing can have, at different times of the day, brings to mind my frustration with people who talk about color theory in the garden. You have to use this color and that color, and with this color, such and such happens, and then talk about all the different shades of red. There's 57 different shades of red, and you have to know the differences between all of them. And my point is something like this, where a flower, depending on the light, will look different, and that will throughout your whole color scheme. Or a flower that opens, white, develops pink, gets to red. Like, how are you supposed to work with that? How do you work like a color scheme that is so finely tuned to all of the tints and tones when that color changes depending on whether a cloud goes by? That kind of frustrates me.
That also frustrates me with paint inside my house.
Or you can just be like us and don't paint anything. So my next surprising plant that has made it through summer is a fern.
I have a fern too. Yay, this is good.
Yeah, we're talking about my fern. Yeah.
I know, but we're on the same wavelength. This is good. I like very, very seamless transitions.
I'm sure we won't stay there long, but anyway, but I have a predisposition to not to think ferns are boring. And many years ago, I worked on an article about ferns, and it really woke me up to the differences in ferns. And so now I think all ferns look alike, except that one, and that one over there. And ooh, look at that one. But no, all ferns look alike. Oh, but what's that one? And so I have this prejudice that is I'm learning to overcome subconsciously. So on some level, I realize that they do not all look alike. But my first instinct is like, ferns, they all look alike, but they really don't. And one that doesn't look like other ferns is Japanese holly fern, Sertomium falcatum. It has like the normal fronds, right? So it's like the long thing that sticks up, and then it has like a broader whatever the thing that sticks off the frond is. It's a pinnae.
We've talked about this before. Ferns have an entire glossary of terms.
Right. So it has a wider thing coming off the frond, so it has much more presence to it. Yet still delicate and ferny, and so it's a fern that really caught my eye, and I really wanted to grow. And I put it in a place where I thought I had moist shade, but it turns out it's really pretty dry shade. And a few ferns have met their maker in this spot. But I'm on year 3 with this fern, Sertomium falcatum. I said to repeat the name. And I'm really surprised about how well it's doing through this drought, because you think ferns, you think moist shade.
Yeah.
This is in dry shade, and it's even drier this year, and it's really not blinking, and really looking great. Gets up to be 2 feet tall, and they say 3 feet wide. Mine is maybe about 1.5 feet tall, and maybe like 10 inches wide at this point. It's slowly bulking up, partial to full shade. Of course, it would prefer moist soil. Who wouldn't? But it's doing fine in dry shade. It's the wide pinnae like sort of have like a little hook at the end of some of them, which is sickle shape, and falcate. And so this you get Sertomium falcatum. I found that mildly interesting, but it's ultimately it's a less intricate, kind of beefier presence to the fern, kind of like it pumps iron, but it isn't a muscle head. So it's muscular without being, the rock,
So like thicker, I'm trying to envision it. I think I got it.
Thicker, but wider.
Okay. All right.
So you've got the frond, you've got that long thing that comes up out of the base.
Yep.
That's it's like the whole leaf or leaflet. And then the things that stick off the side of that are not small. They are wide.
Beefy.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
they're wide. So there's a little more to them.
Gotcha. Now, are we talking as far as the stems are concerned? Is this a thicker stemmed fern, or is this a Japanese painted fern with thin, kind of really wiry stems?
I would say that they are thicker than that.
Okay. Yeah,
I could be wrong because I never noticed stem thickness on any of these. So,
I mean, I'm trying to figure out, a theme of the plants that are making it through, because my Japanese painted ferns are toasted right now, and they're very, the stems on those, they're wiry, super, super wiry. So, I'm wondering a little bit thicker of a stem. Maybe it's able to hold more water for a longer amount of time. I don't know. All speculation on my part, but
yeah, we are way out of my depth on ferns there, which should have been obvious from like the first sentence, but
zones on this guy?
6 to 10.
Oh, interesting. So a little bit warmer loving fern.
Yeah.
Which, maybe that's why it's doing so well.
All right. Well, let's hear about your fern.
All right. So my fern is apple court painted fern. So it's Ethereum.
Time out. You just said your painted ferns were toast.
No, so my straight painted ferns are toast. My, what is it? Is it crested surf is a variety that I've talked about before. Toast. I mean, I think they'll come back because this has happened before where they just look toasted. But the exception has been this apple court painted fern. And again, Ethereum, Niponicum variety, Pictum, apple court. And zones 5 to 7. And here's the interesting experimentation that I did this year without even meaning to. I've had an apple court fern before in a shady spot, moist-ish soil, not overly moist, but it stays. It's not dry shade, that's for sure. Had it for a few years, doing great. This year, wanted to have a couple more of them. Decided to put them as an understory plant in a dry shade area underneath a witch hazel. So root competition, whatever. Probably not the best decision, but hey, let's give it a whirl because I saw that this apple court was doing so much better through some periods of drought we've had in the past. So I planted some new ones. I did do a good job of watering them in this spring. Since then, have stopped watering. We already talked about it. I've got well issues, so not watering it. Both of the apple courts in both of those situations, the newly planted and the one that I've had for years, looking awesome. Not crisping up, not showing signs of drought, looking still beautiful. Now, they look like the typical Japanese painted fern where you get these smaller fronds that are about, the whole plant's about a foot tall by a foot wide. Splashes of purple and silver and green on the leaves, or the fronds rather. And then at the end of the fronds, it's got this funny little tuft, this forked tuft that looks like duck fluff right on the end of the frond. It looks like a mistake, or that, it's producing a plantlet that's gonna just hop off the plant and create a whole new fern, but it never does that. But yeah, I can't believe apple court. And it's so weird because I've got a lot of different painted ferns. I've got the straight Japanese painted fern species. I've got ghost. I've got pearly white, which is other varieties. None of those are looking so great. But this apple court is doing awesome. And I don't know why. Have no idea. But I'm happy that it is.
So did you get this plant at the first super cool plant sale? Or did you have before that?
The original apple court that I got was at the first super cool plant sale. Yeah. So that was 3 or 4 years ago. The ones this spring, obviously we didn't have the plant sale, but I just got from a local nursery.
So this brings up my quibble with this plant. The first time I ever heard of this plant was when you and I were touring a wholesale nursery, looking for good plants. I think the ferns we had on order were looking like heck. And you said, what about that one over there? And it turned out it was apple court.
Apple court.
And you and the gentleman from the wholesale nursery were talking quite a bit about apple court. And so I wrote down apple core as the name of this plant to order several apple core, a name which makes a million times more sense than apple. What's an apple court? It's Court. For those of you who are listening, so many people listening are like apple core, because that's a phrase and that's a word that makes sense. But this is an apple court, which makes no sense whatsoever. What is an apple court? There is like a court full of apples. Like what's?
I just assumed it was, the English garden that it was discovered in. That's what I assumed. But I make that up based on no facts whatsoever.
But there. It needs a different name because it sounds exactly like a phrase that we all have and use with regularity, and just they put something you can hardly hear at the end, to change the name. Just call it apple core.
All right. So apple core is awesome.
You'll probably get sued by, a firm from California. Or the Beatles, the remnants of the Beatles company or something like that. But for the longest time, I thought the name was Apple Core, and so I even we'll take 10 or 15 of those apple cores too. And the guy's like, what? They're the apple cores, that fern, the one that you and Danielle were arguing about. Yeah, we'll take some of those. Oh, you mean apple port?
Apple quartz. Apple
That sounds
quartz.
like a typo. Like somebody messed up the name. That's my
All
only
right.
problem with that plant.
So sucky name, great plant. All right, Steve, we're in the home stretch. So what's your final, it's made it through, I can't believe it, summer's worst?
Well, I'm going to go back to my original plant when we're talking about bare root plants.
Mm-hmm.
I also got from you some bare root grow low sumacs,
Mm.
which, unlike the exocorda and the other plants that I grabbed, those were just random. I actually wanted grow low sumac. It's a plant that I've admired for a long time as being good for down by my road, because I need something that's going to take up space down by the road, is tough, but is low growing. And grow low sumac gets about 18 inches tall, but it's supposed to spread like 8 feet.
Yeah.
And I do see it growing in a lot of parking lots, which is not the plant's fault. It's not the plant's fault, but that's what I need, like, for that tough situation. And so I got some bare root plants. Did the same thing. Did not take care of them all year, and then when frost rolled around, I said, I should heal these in, or at least try to chuck them in some soil. And I was sad this spring when they did not leaf out. And I'm like, oh, I really wanted those too. Figures the ones I really wanted didn't come back, but all these other guys are looking good. And so I ignored them. They're dead. I didn't even bother ripping them out. They're in their holding bed. They can sit there. And so when I was going back and I was looking at the exocorda, and I looked to the right, and there's all the grow low sumacs had leafed out and are looking amazing.
Hooray!
I have given them, like, I didn't even know they existed anymore. I thought they were completely dead. So I'm absolutely thrilled that has made it through this summer, and my abuse from the previous year, and my neglect from this year, and they are looking great. I'm like, oh, good. Now I got to plant those things. It's Rus aromatica is the Latin name. Grow low, GROLOW. So they left the W off the grow, but kept it on the low. Again, sounds like a typo. It's not. It's GRO -LOW, sumac. Like I said, 18 inches tall, and mine are about that tall. Like I thought they were supposed to be shorter, and I was looking at them like, these are kind of growing upright. But I think what happens is, they send their new shoot up, and it gets up to about 18 inches. Then it just kind of arcs over and goes down. Yeah, full sun to partial shade. Utterly not fussy about soil. That's why I can grow in parking lots. This is a cultivar of an eastern native, North American native plants. It has like these little round leaves, and I wrote down round poison ivy ? Because that's kind of what it looks. It kind of looks like poison ivy, but they're round. If they're pointed, they'd be poison ivy. And the best thing about this plant is not only, well, in addition to its toughness, how it can go pretty much anywhere, is the fall color on this thing. You get red, you get purple, you get orange, you get all those shades in between. Those are all the good fall colors. Not like a sickly yellow or a brown. It's those red, purples, and oranges, just absolutely stunning in fall. So utterly drought resistant, even touted as drought resistant by High Country Gardens, from New Mexico. So
Yes.
if a nursery in New Mexico says you're drought tolerant, you're drought tolerant.
Which, funny enough, listeners, keep tuning in, because David Salman from High Country Gardens is our expert testimony today, and he's going to tell us some truly drought tolerant plants, but he's not going to talk about grow low, so we're good. So party on, Steve.
But he would if he could.
Yes.
But I took it from him. So yeah, I'm super impressed, and I can't wait to finally plant this down in the area where I have always dreamt of it going.
Yeah. So this is cool, because I knew you really, really wanted this plant. We had talked about it for years. And then when I got these bare root plants, I decided that, the lovely person that I am, to give them all to you because you had really wanted them. Even though I could have used some for my hospital hill. I was like, no, I'm going to give them to Steve. He deserves it. It really hurt me, but I did. And then you told me you didn't take care of them and you chucked them in somewhere and they died. So I'm happy to hear that they lived. But on the flip side of that, I decided to get some bare root for myself, grow low, this year. And I planted them in June, just as the rain stopped. I haven't watered them. I stuck them in little holes right along Hospital Hill. The little whips are about bare root, like maybe 6 inches, 8 inches tall. Those things still have green leaves and look great right now. So, wow, this thing is tough. I mean, I didn't water it at all. And there was 0 rain between now and then. So I did the same thing that you did. I used and abused them, and they're still going strong. So hopefully you're giving me hope that they'll actually make it through, perhaps till fall.
So you take the time to point out like how selfless you are in giving me these plants that you really want, and then you just turn around and get some more.
It was a year later. I gave you first dibs. That is the kind of person I am. Telling me I never give you plants. Huh. Well, this episode proves that wrong, does it not? Huh.
I think we should end on that cackle.
All right. Well, so listen, great plant. I love Grow Low. I'm looking forward to it also being in a spot that's just super inhospitable, lean soil, hot sun, thrives on neglect. Great. It's also supposedly a great habitat plant for birds because it kind of forms that thicket of low growing, 18-inch tall thicket, and apparently birds just love to nest in it and really have it as a habitat and some protection over the winter. But I'm going on the flip side of things. I'm doing another perennial. I can't believe this.
How many times have you said flip side?
Flip side.
Who's keeping track of that?
Drink.
You only said steroids once. You said flip side 15 times.
So
you seem to have like a word or phrase of the episode, and so like I think when you do that, like in Groucho March's old show, whenever he said the phrase of the show, like something would come down, like woo, and lights would go off, and so
or like Pee-wee's
flip side,
or Pee-wee's Playhouse when it was the word, and they'd all go rah.
Yeah, maybe we should do that,
or we could name our episodes after my phrase of the day or my word of the episode. So
we want people to listen to it. So,
okay. So another perennial, which is odd for me. We've got, 4 perennials for me, which is super odd. But all right. So this is a sedum. No big surprise that sedum does well in drought. Sedum does well in lean soil. Sedum does well in full sun and terrible conditions. However, this is a variegated sedum, and I've had trouble over the years with true variegated sedums, low-growing variegated sedums. They tend to not be as hardy. They tend to look okay the first year, peter out a bit the next year, and then not come back the third year for me. I've been trying this on the edge of my garden for quite a while, my side garden. It's right along a stone wall. It's in full sun. It's got lean soil, but I really wanted a variegated plant there to kind of mingle with some euphorbias and some creeping thymes that I have in the same area. I've experimented, and I won't name names, but with a few variegated sedums that just didn't do it. I'm not sure if it's, how some variegated plants, they just don't collect enough chlorophyll, right? They aren't able to basically feed themselves enough when they get ultra variegated, and they tend to peter out. Usually you see that more in the shade than in the sun, but that's my speculation. Anywho, sedum boogie woogie was a sample plant that was sent our way 3 years ago, maybe longer. It is highly variegated, green and white, smaller foliage, very tight, compact mound that slowly pillows out a bit. It has done extremely well, comes back reliably each winter. I have it in well-drained soil. That would be essential. Sedums, especially low-growing sedums, resent winter wet, so they will rot and not come back. But the best part about this guy is he starts blooming. He started, I guess, about a month ago, maybe a little less. So we're talking mid-July with these really beautiful sunshine yellow flowers. It's still blooming now. So I've got this variegated foliage and these yellow flowers, and it's just spotted and dotted right along the front edge of my garden. And I'm thrilled. It's just a really great mingle plant. I'll call it a mingle plant because it's mingling quite well with other low-growing perennials that I have to just make this carpet matrix of color in the front. 6 to 8 inches tall, so it's very low. 16 inches wide eventually, it says. Mine are only about a foot wide a piece right now. But yeah, just making me super happy. And right now, the cool thing is I don't have a ton of yellow in my garden, but I do have rudbeckias, and those have just come into bloom. So I've got this repeating similar yellow color that is dotting throughout thanks to this sedum boogie woogie and the rudbeckias. And it's just, it's a great little plant, and I'm entirely thrilled with it, especially considering it was a free plant that I wasn't expecting much from. Zones 3 to 9, super tough.
Okay, what percentage would you say of your decision to recommend this plant was based on the fact that you just wanted to say boogie woogie?
Boogie woogie! No, I wanted you to make some sort of song reference. Can you make a song reference to Boogie Woogie?
Boogie Woogie, Bugle Boy from Company B. It's the only song that comes to mind. But Boogie Woogie isn't necessarily a song; it's a style.
Yes.
There you I wish you hadn't said that about variegated sedums, because now I'm looking at all of my variegated sedums. Like, oh, you're going to leave me soon. Like, I'm not going to invest in you. I planted a variegated sedum this spring that. I overwintered in its pot.
Okay.
I got them from the plant sale, the super cool plant sale, which took place in mid-May. Kept them in their pots all year.
Hold on, cut for a second, Steve. Mm-hmm. Your audio just cut out, but it was fine. You just need to take it from. I planted a few variegated sedums.
Okay.
So go for it.
So we're back up?
Yep.
I planted a few variegated sedums.
Yeah, and then you were talking about I overwintered in a pot.
Yeah, they had been in their pots, since all year. Like I got them in mid-May. Never planted them throughout the year. I put them over, towards the woods and buried them in leaves with a bunch of other perennials. And forgot about them, and then this spring went back and uncovered some other things and saw that they were there too, and had lived. And so then I put them in my rock garden, where I've neglected them, and they're hanging on. They're still doing okay, but I now resent them because I put this effort into them. They're going to leave me soon.
Not necessarily.
You have ruined variegated sedums for me.
Not necessarily. I just had a string of bad luck with variegated sedums. I feel like there was a few that I had gotten from the plant sale, didn't do very well. There were some that I tried when I first planted my garden, didn't do very well. But, hey, they're always improving upon plants. So, Boogie Woogie being a newer plant, perhaps it will, hold true for the ones that you just planted. It'll be tough as nails. And Boogie Woogie all the way through the winter for you.
And now, because everything sounds better with a British accent, here's Peter with his take on summer survival.
It used to be that by the end of summer, we were all feeling a bit bedraggled. Heat and humidity had worn us down to the point where another sunny day would have us asking, well, is there at least a breeze? September was our saviour, as temperatures cooled off and the kids became more of their teacher's problem than ours. Technology has changed much of that. Long, hot family car rides are now climate-controlled, and every passenger, except the driver we hope, has their eyes and ears tuned into their phone. If you don't like the summer weather these days, just go back inside and turn up the AC. Unfortunately, plants have no access to air conditioning. By the time Labor Day rolls around, they have suffered the effects of prolonged heat, desiccating drought, or sticky humidity, or all of these at different times. Some years and in some regions, rain is plentiful in the summer, and temperatures don't get that hot. But more often than not these days, our plants have to deal with the worst summer can offer. So, pour yourself a cool drink. Iced tea, gin and tonic, or for Danielle, a Tanteo double jalapeno margarita. Toast to the plants that have made it through to fall, then toast to the ones that didn't make it. Perhaps we will see them again next spring.
So I knew ahead of time that Peter was giving me permission to drink tequila this episode, so this isn't water.
Who's kidding who? You don't need permission to drink tequila.
Very true. And you know who else doesn't need permission to do whatever they want? Is our expert on expert testimony. Let's see who we've got up.
Hello, I'm David Salman, founder and chief horticulturist of High Country Gardens. And I'll be talking about today's topic, plants that made it through summer's worst. I've spent my career as a Western gardener, gardening with plants in the high desert of northern New Mexico. This is a high elevation area, around 7,000 feet, and lays at the intersection of three major ecosystems, the Great Plains, the Rocky Mountains, and the Colorado Plateau. Now, northern New Mexico has been in a severe drought since 2010, with a year's reprieve last year in 2019, but unfortunately, we're back into drought in 2020. So I thought it would be instructive to highlight a few of the many plants that I garden with that have been the best performers in these difficult drought conditions over the past decade. These plants have not only survived the severe drought, because of course we can always supplement their water needs with irrigation, but I always irrigate very modestly because doesn't make sense to irrigate heavily when plants are really stressed by dry conditions. But of more damage to the plants I found were browsing rabbits and other herbivores, which when they didn't have food in the surrounding areas came into our gardens for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So the four plants that I'll be talking about survive not only dry conditions, but also hungry animals, and I highly recommend them all for other Western gardeners who face difficult similar growing conditions. The first xeric plant that I would like to talk about is Zinnia grandiflora, or prairie zinnia. This is a perennial wildflower, unlike the more common annual zinnias that we all know from our mothers' and grandmothers' gardens, where they're grown often for cut flowers. Zinnia grandiflora is native to primarily New Mexico, but overlaps into the surrounding states of Arizona, Colorado, western Oklahoma, western Kansas, and a little bit of northern Texas. This is a fabulous plant that grows in any soil type from sand to clay. It's very xeric once established, and is very long blooming, coming into color in late spring, early summer, and continuing to flower through the summer. Here in New Mexico, we often get midsummer rains, we call them monsoons, and so the monsoons will often bring Zinnia grandiflora back into flower in August and September. It grows as a ground cover. In other words, it's not very tall, about anywhere from 2 to 3 inches tall, but spreads via underground stolons to form large colonies, as you often see it out on the plains. It's really a popular plant with a lot of the native bees and other insect pollinators. And my original Zinnia grandiflora planting in my backyard, I actually planted it between flagstone, which we use as patio pavers here in New Mexico. And the Zinnia grandiflora between my flagstones have persisted for over 30 years and are still looking good. So a fantastic low-growing ground cover that really adds a lot to the xeriscape. The next plant I'd like to talk about is another New Mexico native, Nolina greenii. A recently described species, it used to be considered part of the Nolina texana complex, but it was separated out a few years back. It's native to a limited area in northeastern New Mexico, found primarily around river canyons, stony hillsides, and other rough areas. It's an evergreen succulent with beautiful flat leaves that stick up, to about 2 or 3 feet with very beautiful thread-like leaf tips, and a flower spike that blooms in the foliage rosette that is an amazing attractor of native bees and other native pollinators. So it's invaluable as a nectar source for our native pollinators and is very long-lived. I estimate that a large, well-established plant can easily be 50 years old, so it is a very permanent part of your landscape. And it grows like an evergreen grass, so it provides a year-round interest with its interesting foliage. And because it has an enormous deep root system, it is, as I mentioned, a permanent and beautiful part of your xeriscape. The third plant I'd like to discuss is Salvia dagustanica, or dwarf silverleaf sage. This is an Old World native from the Caucasus Mountains that straddle the border between Europe and Asia, stretching between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. This is a botanically extremely rich region of the world, from which we get many wonderful alpine rock garden plants as well as other xeric perennials and woody plants for North American gardens. Now, I like to include Old World plants in my gardens along with the natives because the honeybees, which can often compete with our native bees for nectar, particularly love Old World plants, and of course Salvia dagustanica is no exception. This wonderful little plant has rosettes of pure silver leaves held right above the ground, only about 2 inches tall, and it blooms in late spring with 10-inch tall spikes of these giant pure blue flowers that when I first saw it bloom, oh gosh, it must have been about 20 years ago, it literally took my breath away. It was such a fantastic flower. This plant grows in a variety of soils, including clay, which make it very versatile because, throughout the Intermountain region, we have lots of different soil types. Of course, the browsing rabbits and other herbivores leave it alone completely, and it has been thriving in my garden in spite of the 10 years of drought for an excess of about 15 years. So it's a highly recommended xeric plant. And the last plant I'd like to discuss is a very obscure plant, but actually one of my favorites, Stachys lavandulifolius, or I nicknamed it cotton candy lamb's ear. It really doesn't have a common name because it's rarely found in cultivation. Like Salvia dagustanica, this comes from the Caucasus Mountains on the border of Europe and Asia, stretching again between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. And this plant is about as tough as they come. It's not a big grower and spreads like a small-scale ground cover. The foliage is only about 3 to 4 inches tall, and then these incredible hairy, calyxed, pink-flowered bloom spikes stick up about 6 to 8 inches. And if you'll plant it where it can catch either the early morning sun or the late afternoon sun, the flower spikes literally light up as the hairy calyxes seem to capture the light and just glow. It's very popular with the honeybees, being an Old World plant, so it's an important nectar source for the honeybees. And it's long-lived. I've got plants in my garden that have made it through the drought and are going on, about 15 years old. The particular strain that I found is particularly easy to grow because the species is found over a wide range in Iran, Iraq, and into the Caucasus Mountains. So there are a few different strains in the specialist trade among rock gardeners, but the one that we sell through High Country Gardens is a very, very easy form of the species to grow, where many of the others I've really struggled with. So a very good, long-lived, tough, popular with the honeybees, xeric addition to your garden.
So, Danielle, I was pleased to hear about these plants that could make it through a New Mexico summer because I sure could never make it through a New Mexico summer.
Oh my goodness, neither could I. Who are you kidding though, Steve? You couldn't make it through a Maine summer.
Oh, I could. I could very easily. I would love to try.